Shalom, shalom, brothers and sisters. We back at it again, waiting for this marvelous Passover to come upon us tonight. First of all, I want to give all honor, glory, and praise to the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Holy One of Israel, who is Jesus. Another thing I want to do is I want to shout out to my Walls of Jericho crew. We're going to really buckle down on taking a different angle with things, more so with the archaeology, anthropology, history. If you know us, then you know this is what we do, and we're still equipped with that salvation teachings too. Don't get it twisted. So shout out to my brothers. I love y'all, man. Like I said, we gonna keep fighting and do this fight. Now, the reason I brought them up is if y'all have seen us around and we've been passing out these pamphlets, right? I don't know if y'all can see that. We've been passing out these pamphlets. It's got another cover page, so don't worry about that. But we've been passing out these pamphlets on the Exodus. It's called A Journey Through Time, and that's what this lesson is going to be about. But we wanted to give the people an actual tangible documentation, or something that's tangible, so that instead of you reading this book and reading these stories and thinking they're just stories, this is something that you can actually touch and see. And this is the great thing, because this actually increases our faith, y'all, right? Now, this is going to be tied into the Passover once again, because if you don't have the Exodus, the actual Exodus and the events of the Exodus, then you don't have the Passover. And of course, we got both, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take our time and do some real life math, right? So before we get into that, I want to speak on the consensus of in the time frames of what people think the Exodus is. So with this breakdown, I right now, I am not going to focus on dates, the chronology of dates. The reason why is because you really can't trust Egyptian chronology, and that's what they really have based the actual Exodus, the date of the Exodus, on Egyptian chronology. They also base it on mistranslations of actual pharaohs and mistranslations of the word Judah and all that. So if you go into the temple walls of Karnak, when we get into it even further, Champollion, which is supposed to be the so-called father of Egyptology, right? He made a mistranslation on the temple walls of Karnak on the kingdom of Judah, right? We're not going to spend too much time into that, but the sources that I do have, I tell y'all to go watch videos or whatever you want more of a breakdown. But like I said, this is about finding out where this thing actually landed, seeing these patterns of evidence and in its sequential order, but not worrying about the dates based on Egyptian chronology, right? So we're going to do some math, right? So if you ever heard anybody talk about who was the pharaoh of the Exodus, and I'm not even going to get into that, but if you have somebody talk about who the pharaoh of the Exodus is, you have some people that have Tutmos III of the 18th dynasty, and then you have the date of the Exodus coming out of 1446 BCE. Tutmos III reigned over Egypt from 1479 BCE till 1425 BCE. So 1446 would be in his range, right? Then you also have the most popular consensus, right? What they based this doggone Ten Commandments movie with Charleston Heston on was Ramses II. Ramses II rule was from 1279 BCE to 1213 BCE, with the Exodus being 1250 BCE, right? Then you have Sethnic, right? Pharaoh Sethnic of the 20th dynasty, that some people say is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and his reign was from 1190 till 1187 BCE. He's the Pharaoh of the Exodus now, right? Then you have Shoshank, who's not necessarily the Pharaoh of the Exodus, but he's Shishak in Second Chronicles, the 12th chapter. Now, it's a good thing that our ancestors left us numbers so we could check this, right? So those numbers are from the time that Solomon was building the temple all the way back to when the children of Israel, which we're going to read, the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, was 480 years, right? So we're going to start this. We're going to start this, excuse me. We're going to start with Shoshank real quick, right? Hold on, y'all. Bear with me. So you see we got our calculator, right? We're going to start with Shoshank and see where we land. If we even land in any of these other timelines for people to say this is what it is, right? So once again, Shoshank of the 22nd dynasty, his reign was from 945 BCE to 925 BCE. Now, I'm gonna start with the end of his reign because they have no date, accurate date on when he invaded Judah, right, in the 5th year of Rehoboam. This is where Shoshank was supposed to have invaded, right? So now let's try 925 BCE, and we're going to add that and go up, right? That's how you deal with BC and AD, all that. So you got 925. Y'all see that? 925 BCE plus 480 years, right? And that's going to come up to 1405 BCE. This is outside of the reign of Thutmose III. This is outside of the reign of Ramses II. This is outside of the reign of Sethnic. And this, so because those would be the pharaohs of the Exodus, right? And this is why I don't get into who the pharaoh of the Exodus is. But what we can do is we can see these events happening in a certain era without marking specifically what the date is. Because if you see the patterns of evidence, if you see the actual evidence of the story happening in a certain era, then that's all you need, right? You want to get too overwise on things. If the thing happened in history, it's real. Let's not get too technical. Let's not get too complicated with things, right? So we're dealing with that, right? Now, what I also want to do is, since we've seen that, right? We've seen that. What I also want to do is read. My bad. Read from this. We're actually gonna read down here from this, and then we're gonna go to the scriptures of everything. Then we're gonna go to the archaeology that these folks have found, right? And we're going to see if this is the Exodus. So the title of this lesson is A Journey Through Time, the Exodus. If this is not it, then what is it? A Journey Through Time, the Exodus. If this is not it, then what is it? Because this is going back farther than any of these dates that I just mentioned, right? So if it goes back further and there's an actual story there, like these Kemetic folk want to say, the most favorite thing they want to say is a plagiarized story. You're going to get that when you deal with them a lot, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start breaking this down. We're going to start with this. Right? So, first of all, I'm going to give a quote from the actual pamphlet. I'm going to give a quote by Marcus Garvey so we can be motivated, right? Because Marcus Garvey himself was a commandment keeper no matter what happened in his earlier life. His later life. He was an Israelite and he was a commandment keeper, right? So I'm going to use his quote. He says, if we as a people realize the greatness from which we came, we would be less likely to disrespect ourselves, right? And that is a true statement. If we knew where we came from, we would be more than likely not to disrespect ourselves. So we're going to see the evidence of where we came from, y'all, right? So I'm just going to read this off top, and then we're going to deal with the scriptures and then the archaeology as I'm reading, right? So it says, and once again, this was created by the Walls of Jericho team. If y'all actually want copies of this, then just, holler at either one of us and then we'll try our best to get it to you as fast as we can, right? So it says, the God of Israel has revealed himself time and time again. And he has, it's just people don't want to see it, right? Those that hate him have taken crafty counsel against him and his chosen people, right? This is in Psalms 83, 1 through 5, that the nations have taken crafty counsel against Israel, and they wanted to make the remembrance of Israel to cease, right? Be forgotten. So that's why this stuff like this is real important. This for also these people, for some strange reason, they don't think when we get into archaeology, history, and all that, that this is not a salvation issue. And it can very well be a salvation issue, because if you ain't got the tangible proof, for a lot of people, especially in this new generation, they ain't trying to hear it as religion. We're trying to kill that, right? We don't need to be hovering over all this religious dogma. We need some truth. We need some facts, right? That we can back up with empirical evidence. That's what we need, right? So, of course, evidence is a salvation issue. It increases faith. Faith is definitely a salvation issue. But like I said, everybody will have their own opinion about that. But we'll see when we finish this. So let's keep going. Our job as his priest is to show the world his glory and that he is the God of all gods and the one true God. That's definitely the priest of the Most High's job, right? The foundation of his true fame is when he brought Israel out of the land of Egypt to set his people in their own land with their own heritage and laws. There has been so much controversy on whether the events of the Exodus occurred, because, man, this is, hey, y'all, for real, this right here, I have had trouble with this. I'm so glad when I found this, at least the evidence that the actual story actually happened, right? I was so amazed when I saw this, it increased my faith extremely. That's why even in this pandemic, you see me out here going hard, not worrying about the plague coming to get me when it comes to keeping the commandments of God, right? I believe in the protection because of all the evidence that has been shown to me and has been shown to my brothers and other people that are like them, right? So let us continue. Is this just a story based on pious fiction? That's what they want to call it, pious or righteous fiction, right? It's a story, but it's a story that's made to make you do righteous, be an upright person, right? To make righteous decisions, to keep the law, statutes, and commandments of God, whether it's real or not. But see, we're gonna deal with that. Whether it's real or not, we're going to see that it is real, right? We're going to see that it's real. Or can these events be proven as historical fact? Right. So let's continue. Let's see this. The doubt stems from archaeologists and Egyptologists using Egyptian chronology, the dates, to determine when the events of the Bible occurred in history, right? Now, let's look at this, y'all, because if Egypt's dates are wrong, this is why you can't necessarily rely on dates, right? They're good in certain areas, right? And after a certain amount of time, it seems like they're more accurate. But when you go back further and further in ancient times, it seems to get lost. So what we got to do now is focus on the events that happened. Once again, right? Let us continue. However, according to filmmaker Timothy Mahoney and his team of excavators and historians who have worked diligently to find historical evidence to back up the biblical narrative of the Exodus, they have concluded that the patterns of evidence of events in history is a more accurate account rather than basing the accuracy of the Exodus on the dates and times that may not be accurate. So they have concluded that the patterns of evidence of events in history is more accurate of an account. So if we're following the evidence of the history, the patterns of the evidence, we'll find the story still without worrying about the dates, right? So this is what they concluded. And this is Timothy Mahoney, filmmaker Timothy Mahoney, right? And he has a book called The Patterns of Evidence. He also has a film called The Patterns of Evidence. This man right here, I want to show y'all something. As far as faith and why people talking about this is not a salvation issue, right? This man right here spent his life savings. He put his wife and all type of stuff in put his wife and all type of stuff in a worry and everything. But he spent his life savings to prove his faith. He used all the money that he had to go out and prove that his faith was real. And this was a Gentile. How many of y'all gonna do that? How many of y'all gonna spend the time and the money to prove that your faith is real? Right? Not many. Let's keep it 100. It says a remnant shall be saved. So not many. So the fact that he did this, people should be thanking him because there's not many of us going out there trying to track this history, because so many of us think this is not a salvation issue, right? But we're gonna handle that today, right? We're gonna keep going. Mahoney's leading Egyptologist, David Rowe, who happens to be an agnostic, right? One who is undecided about the existence of God. That's what an agnostic is. So now, this is not no biased research. This is not a Christian Egyptologist. It's an oxymoron, but sort of. But this is not a Christian who's trying to prove his faith by a confirmation bias. He has no reason to try to prove this other than for the sake of accurate history, for the love of being accurate with your history. So let us point that out. He is agnostic. His leading Egyptologist is agnostic, right? By faith, has challenged all the major and well-respected archaeologists and Egyptologists of his time on the accuracy of the popular consensus of Pharaoh Shishak in the Bible, or who he is in the Bible, right? So the consensus is that Pharaoh Shishak is Shoshank of the 22nd dynasty. But I just showed y'all with the dates how that wouldn't be accurate, right? And reason why it wouldn't be accurate, because remember I said the dates are not the issue, right? We're not worried about the dates. However, the time period of when this was said, that should fit in that time period, and the patterns of evidence of the story should be in that time period. There should be evidence of that. There is no evidence of Exodus in the time of Ramses II, right? None. That's why they think it's a fake story, right? I don't even find any evidence, right, of there being a Exodus at Tutmos III his reign. I don't find none of this stuff, right? And then if you're saying that there was one, we got one that's further back in time. And now you got to explain, well, if this has happened, then what are all these stories? They might be plagiarized from this older story, or is this older story the Exodus, right? So we're going to continue, right? Let's see where we are. Okay. Shishak took the golden shields that Solomon had made in the time of Rehoboam, king of Judah, more specifically the 5th year of Rehoboam, king of Judah. Now we're gonna confirm that. This is 2 Chronicles, the 12th chapter. 2 Chronicles, the 12th chapter, and we're gonna start at verse 1. 2 Chronicles, the 12th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Verse 1 reads, "And it came to pass when Rehoboam had established the kingdom and had strengthened himself, he forsook the law of the Lord and all Israel with him. And it came to pass that in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem because they had transgressed against the Lord. With 1,200 chariots and 70,000 horsemen, and the people were without number that came with him out of Egypt. The Lubims and Sakkaims, right? The Lubims and the Sakkaims and the Ethiopians, right? And he took the fenced cities which pertained to Judah and came to Jerusalem." We're going to skip down to verse 9. Verse 9 reads, "So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took all. He carried away also the shields of gold which Solomon had made." So that's what was said in this article, right? That Shishak took the fenced cities of Judah in the time of Rehoboam, more specifically in the 5th year of Rehoboam, king of Judah, and he took the golden shields that Solomon had made, right? So this is Shishak, right? Who they said was Shoshank, who we showed could not be this person, because if you track back, because this is the 5th year of Rehoboam the king, y'all, right? Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, right? So Solomon's reign was not that far from Rehoboam. So you're not going to go too far outside of that generation to make sure that this pattern of evidence should still land in the same era, right? So we're going to continue. Now, this is from Shishak, right? And we're going to now look at the number of years from the Exodus all the way down till Solomon, right? Because we want to find out when the Exodus happened. Not the dates, but the era that it happened with the evidence of the story there, right? Let us continue. Let's go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings, the 6th chapter. 1 Kings, the 6th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. 1 Kings, the 6th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. And we're going to continue reading from the article, but I want to get this out the way real quick. so y'all can follow me. Right. So this is First Kings, the 6th chapter, and we're gonna start at verse 1. First Kings, the 6th chapter, and we're gonna start at verse 1. Verse 1 reads, "And it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord." So from the 4th year of Solomon's reign, 480 years from the 4th year of Solomon's reign, right? We're not worried about dates, is when the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt. Now, the reason why we brought up Shishak is because Shishak will be the basis of trying to find out where the Exodus was, right? Because you're still going to be in that same era. You're still going to be in that same era. They're not too far away from each other, right? So you're still going to be in that same era. Now, once again, the title of the lesson is A Journey Through Time, the Exodus. If this is not it, then what is it? Right? So you're going to come up with your own conclusion. My conclusion is this is it. But you're going to come up with your own conclusion, even if you don't necessarily agree with this. Come up with your own conclusion, and if you got one that's better, bring it out. I want to hear it. This is the best that I can come up with, right? The best that they can come up with, rather. So let us go back. So we know that the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt 480 years before the 4th year of Solomon's reign, when he was building the temple, when he started to build the temple. So let's go back to the article and keep reading. So, here we go. To place the Exodus in its right time, the construction of the temple started 480 years after Israel came out of the land of Egypt. You see, we just read that, right? 1 Kings 6:1. Once Shishak is established, we can then count the years back to establish the kingdom in which the Exodus took place, rather than the actual date, and see if we find evidence of events. Mahoney and Rowe have concluded that Shishak is Ramses II of the 19th dynasty, rather than the consensus of Shoshank I of the 22nd dynasty, right? So now, y'all can go to a video called Time Wall, The Patterns of Evidence. It's 2 videos, right? And this is a lecture from David Rowe. He will get in a little deeper than what I'm going to do right now. But what was profound about this is that he showed that Ramses the second, which Ramses being the Greek version of his name, Ramses the second was named Shishak, or more specifically, his name was Rea Shishak Miyamana. That is Ramses II's real name. If you go in a certain point in time, when you break down, he'll break that down with the languages and stuff. The Wav and the Quav, as far as in the Semitic, the Proto-Semitic language, came at different times. So the Wav would be like a W or a U sound, and the Quav would be a K sound. So the Quav would be based on the word Shishak. So with the Wav, it'd be Rea Shisha Miyamana. With the Quav, it would be Rea Shishak Miyamana. For short, it is Shishak, right? So now we got to prove if that's even true, right? Because that name, just like Shoshank, that name could be a coincidence, right? So that's what we're going to do. we're going to continue and see if this is accurate, if there's evidence around this. Let us continue. The consensus is based on the scholar Jean-Francis Champollion. Jean-Francis Champollion was a French scholar, philologist, and Orientalist, known primarily as the decipherer of the Egyptian hieroglyphs and a founding figure in the field of Egyptology. He was crowned the father of Egyptology. Remember I mentioned that, y'all? He was crowned the father of Egyptology. Yeah, right. He assumed, based on a mistranslation, that Shishak was Shoshank the first, based on the hieroglyphs found on the walls of the temple of Karnak in Thebes, right? Y'all can actually look this up. Just go online and look up temple walls in Karnak. But like I said, go to the video so he can break it down. This is actually his field of expertise, David Rowe. He will break down how he got the name and how Francis Champollion ended up making this translation and where he made an error at, right? Because we see that this is not matching up, right? Because if Shoshank was indeed the pharaoh of Second Chronicles, the 12th chapter, then you should still see evidence, y'all. You should still see evidence of the patterns of the events of the Exodus in the times where the consensus say they are. You start 480 years prior to Shoshank. You go back farther than Ramses II. And eventually you will go back farther than Tutmos the third. And if you start from Shoshank, remember this is in the 5th year of Rehoboam the king, which is the son of Solomon. However, the countdown starts from the 4th year of Solomon, king of Israel, right? The 4th year of Solomon and the 5th year of Rehoboam is not that far away from each other, where you will not land in the same era. And then wherever you land, I repeat this, there should be some evidence there. Otherwise, this stuff ain't gonna make no sense. And it's gonna seem like it's just a religious story to motivate us to be upright, instead of actually having some tangible proof behind it, right? So he said that on the temple walls of Karnak and Thebes, that John Francis Champollion mistranslated one of the hieroglyphs, right? And once again, when I was mentioning it, is that he mistranslated the kingdom of Judah. Go to that video, and it will show you what I'm talking about. Let us continue. However, Shoshank's military campaign shows that he never waged war with Judah at all. So that's another thing that's messed up, right? And on the walls, it shows that this Shoshank did not go to Judah. He waged war with Israel, the northern kingdom. So he did not go to war with Judah, right? At all. So his story and Shishak's story doesn't match, right? That's simple. That's simple stuff. Instead of just going into the depthness of detail, that is the simple stuff right there, right? According to the Egyptian Hittite peace treaty, a treaty made at the Battle of Kadesh, Ramses II name, his real name is Shishak. Once again, it's Ria Shishak Miyamana. Ria Shishak Miyamana. That is Ramses II real name. For short, it's Shishak. Ramses being the Greek version of his name. And his history on the walls of Karnak matched the biblical narrative. So we're getting somewhere, right? If we went 480 years from Ramses Though he invaded after Solomon's death, we want to point that out, you will still land in the middle kingdom of Egypt, which is in the 12th and 13th dynasty of Egypt. So we didn't say the 20th dynasty with Sethnic. We didn't say the 22nd dynasty. We tried the 22nd dynasty with Shoshank, right? So now, as far as the pharaohs of the Exodus, you have Sethnic, you have Ramses II, and then you have Tutmos III, right? So if anything is before that, that means that this don't matter because it's a made up or plagiarized story. But if we go back and we see that the biblical narrative is matching the archaeology and the history, then we got to come up to a conclusion, y'all. If it quack like a duck, if it walk like a duck, if it quack like a duck, it's a duck, right? 2 + 2 = 4. I always say that. So we landed in the 12th and 13th dynasty of Egypt. Now, if this is a historical fact, we should find the events of the Exodus in the Middle Kingdom. And let's see if we're going to do that. According to the book, A Filmmaker's Journey, Patterns of Evidence by Timothy Mahoney with Stephen Law. Once again, that's this. Y'all see that, right? Cop this book. It's real good book. Mahoney interviews David Rowe, who tells him there was only one Semitic palace ever in Egypt in history at that time, a Semitic palace. Right? We're going to get this going to get good because it's going to be things that just pop up at you, right? So he says that there was only one Semitic palace ever in Egypt in history at this time during the Middle Kingdom in the city of Avaris, which is the biblical Ramses, right? Because when we came out of the land of Egypt, we came out from Ramses to Succoth, right? But that's actually from Avaris, which is in Goshen, where we were, Avaris to Succoth, right? Where we traveled, which is in the land of Goshen, right? This palace has 12 columns, right? How many tribes of Israel were there? 12, right? So it has 12 columns with 12 graves in the back quarter. 12 graves and 12 columns, huh? Okay. One of the graves is a pyramid grave that was only given to high-ranking officials. Who would that high-ranking official be, y'all? We're talking about Joseph. 12 columns, 12 columns and 12 graves in the Semitic palace, or Shemitic. You see what I'm saying? Let's keep going. One of the graves, when they dug in a particular grave site, it was this the only one of the graves. It was the only one of the graves they found completely empty, right? Including the bones. Now, who is that? Now let's go see. They found it completely empty, including the bones. Let us go to Genesis, the 47th chapter. Genesis, the 47th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Sorry, bear with me. Genesis, the 47th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Verse 1 reads, Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. Right? Didn't we just say Avaris, or the biblical Ramses, was in the land of Goshen? So we all know we're in the same place, right? 12 columns, 12 graves, right? One of the graves was a pyramid grave that they only give the high-ranking officials that they found in Avaris in the biblical city of Ramses that is in Goshen. We just read in Genesis, the 47th chapter, that they came from the land of Canaan to the land of Goshen. So we're going to still see that this is all connected with each other, right? Now, let us go and deal with the bones, right? Genesis, the 50th chapter. Genesis, the 50th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 25. Genesis, the 50th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 25. Now, watch this, y'all, because this stuff is interesting, right? Verse 25, and Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. And Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So we know that this grave site that they found, the archaeologists found this grave site with these 12 graves, with these 12 columns, with this pyramid grave that they only give the high-ranking officials. And the Bible just confirmed that Joseph was buried in the land of Egypt. Now, not only that, right? All of the graves had something in it, which means that they found the graves of our ancestors, of our patriarchs, right? They found them. They at least found them, right? This is what we're getting into. Things are being discovered that can no longer be ignored, right? So they found them, but in this pyramid grave, they didn't find the bones, right? And what it says, that Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. Right? Ye shall surely carry up my bones from hence. Now let's continue. Let's go to Joshua. Let's go to Joshua. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry. Let's continue. We're going to go back to Joshua, but let us continue. This is obvious evidence of Joseph and his family in Egypt, and the empty grave confirms that the vow Joseph made with his brothers to bring his bones out of Egypt was fulfilled. Right? When they entered the promised land, this was fulfilled. So let's go see that. When they entered into the promised land, this was fulfilled. Let's go see that. Joshua, the 24th chapter. Joshua, the 24th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 32. Joshua, the 24th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 32. Verse 32 reads, and the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem, in a parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver, and it became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. So it's fulfilled, right? Now we see why that pyramid grave didn't have the bones in it. Because our ancestors, now if y'all want to see the which is actually on the article, once again, if you want the article, just let us know, that they actually show them digging in these graves to see that these bones was gone and to see that the bones were in the other ones, right? So the biblical narrative is matching the archaeology so far in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, right? Let us continue. So nobody has denied these facts, including Rowe's critics, because he got a lot of critics that say this is not accurate, right? It's funny because they don't deny his findings, but they still deny that it's the Exodus. It's crazy. But reason why he challenged them all is because it seemed like, remember when I told y'all that we're dealing with the crafty council, right? These cats, when they went over to Egypt, they couldn't even straight up say, well, we're coming to dig up and look for archaeology of the children of Israel. They couldn't say that because it is illegal over there. This is part of the crafty council, right? Especially in the land of Canaan area. It's illegal to dig in that area. That's why you don't find much when it comes to dealing with Israel. This crafty council is real, y'all. It's real. So let us continue. According to the Brooklyn Papyrus, right, which is a medical papyrus from ancient Egypt and is one of the oldest preserved writings about medicine and archaeology, right? The list of the slaves in Egypt was also recorded. Y'all hear that? In the Brooklyn Papyrus, right? The most important text recounts the efforts of the 13th dynasty Theban noblewoman named Synopsi, forgive me, y'all, with this name. Synopsi established records of legal ownership of 95 household servants, whose names indicated that 45 were of Asiatic or Afro-Asiatic, which is Hebrew origin, right? Because that's how they distinguish the Egyptians from the people that came from the land of Canaan, right? These were the Asiatics. You know what I'm saying? These were the foreigners that came to Egypt, right? The presence of so many foreigners in a single household suggests that the Asiatic population was increasing rapidly in the 13th dynasty of Egypt. Y'all hear that? Where do we find this at? Right? We're going to get into that, right? Where do we find this at? Let's keep going. As was customary, some of these foreigners no doubt married Egyptians. Who do you think that was? Right? Our forefathers that went into the land of Egypt, them 70 souls, right? The men took Egyptian wives, right? So it's obvious that these men took Egyptian wives, no doubt, adopted Egyptian beliefs and cultural traditions. This is why, if y'all actually go look at who that golden calf was, Apis, that they made, that Aaron made with the children of Israel when Moses went up to the mount to get the 10 commandments, that was still an Egyptian god they were dealing with. So they kept these Egyptian cultures and beliefs, right? So this is making sense, right? And were absorbed into the cultural mainstream. Others, especially prisoners of war or descendants of military captives, remain loyal to their Asiatic Hebraic heritage. And you see that it was like that in Egypt. Some of these foreigners facilitated the collapse of the Middle Kingdom and the later conquest of Egypt by the Asiatic Hyksos in the Second Intermediate Period. So they always try to say that the Israelites, especially the Kemetic folks, they always try to say that the Israelites are the Hyksos. Hyksos just means foreign rulers, y'all. But they were also termed Asiatic. We don't know who specifically they are. Some of them say they were Midianites. Some of them say they were Edomites. You know, we don't know who they were, right? We just know that they were foreign rulers of Egypt. They came into Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, and they came and conquered. That's as we were going outside. Now, there wasn't really a war here, and y'all can already dictate why that was, because, which they also found archaeology on, right? It's because the army drowned in the sea. So there was no real combat or nothing for the Hyksos to come in and take over the land of Egypt as we were going out. We were going out as they were coming in. This is why they have such a confusion on this particular topic, right? So let us continue. According to the Ipuwer Papyrus, which was written by a scribe named Ipuwer, concerning the condition of Egypt in the Middle Kingdom again. So now we have all this archaeology in the Middle Kingdom. You have the Brooklyn Papyrus in the Middle Kingdom showing this. You have the Ipuwer papyrus, now we're saying, in the Middle Kingdom. And we're going to get specific with that because a lot of people date the Ipuwer papyrus at the 19th dynasty. That's not the original copy. Let's continue. Yeah, the contents of this papyrus have an oddly familiar ring to those who know the Old Testament. Plague is throughout the land. Blood is everywhere. The river is blood. Gates, columns, and walls are consumed by fire. Cattle's moan. The land is not light. Darkness fills the land, right? You can find this in Exodus, the 7th chapter through the 10th chapter, and the Ipuwer papyrus, Leiden 344, the 2nd chapter through the 9th chapter, right? Let's continue. Literary analysis would put the original, of which the Leiden papyrus, 19th dynasty, as I said, is a copy at some time during the end of the Egyptian Middle Kingdom and the very beginning of the turbulent Hyksos period. So now you're showing the Brooklyn papyrus showing you that this happened at the end of, at the beginning of the Hyksos period. And the Ipuwer papyrus is showing at the beginning of the Hyksos period. Hyksos not being Israelites, right? Let us continue. Also, during the time of the new rulers of Egypt by the Hyksos, Joshua's campaign through Jericho was underway. At the end of the conquest, Mahoney's team have discovered the covenant stone. Y'all hear that? The covenant stone that Joshua made in Shechem. We're going to read that later on. Now, these are the patterns. These patterns show that this was indeed the Exodus and that the biblical narrative is actual historical facts instead of pious fiction, right? This does show that. Archaeology shows that. Papyruses show that. You got the biblical narrative shows it. The papyruses show it, right? So we can see that there's something happening here, y'all, that we don't need dates to base it off of. So what is this, right? Is this just a story that's just happening in Egyptian history? Or is this the Exodus, right? Let us continue. Now they found 10 artifacts pointing to the historicity of the Exodus. What we're going to do is we're going to deal with 4 of them, right? We don't have to do all 10. But like I said, if y'all want this article, let us know. The article has all 10 of them on there. You can read the article, but I am just showing y'all through the Bible, through the archaeology, that we do have patterns of evidence of the Exodus, which leads us to our Passover being authentic as well, and not just being a story that we didn't concoct it in our heads, or some white man in the back in the day didn't concoct it in his head. No, this is something that actually happened, right? So the first one we're going to deal with is the Mythosol house at Avaris. The Mythosol house at Avaris. And if I'm pronouncing these wrong, y'all bear with me, forgive me, right? The pronunciation is not necessarily important in this case, but the actual artifact being real and being what it is important, right? So let us deal with that. The Mythosol house at Avaris. The Mythosol house at Avaris. It says at least 650 years. Now, the sources will be on this article. Once again, if you want the article, come holler at us. So it says at least 650 years before the Merneptah stele was erected. Now, the Merneptah is the son of Ramses II. They created a stele or stela from him based on the battle of Kadesh that his father fought in, and all the nations that he conquered was on this steel. Israel being one of them, right? And he attacked Judah. So Israel being one of them, right? And according to them, they wiped out Israel, right? According to them. And it's another thing. The Egyptians be romanticizing everything. And they'll make it seem like they ain't lost no wars. If you leave it up to them, you would have to go into other history to see that they lost wars. They don't like doing that because in their religion, they feel like if you write your defeats in your history book, you are giving power to your enemies in the afterlife. So don't let them fool you with the chronology and the history. They romanticize their history, y'all. So don't sit here and rely on their history as everything being there, right? So we got the Menopta stele was erected, right? Or before the Menopta stele was erected. So this is 650 years prior to the Menopta stele, right? Or in the Menopta. This still lands us in the same area. Why? Because if Menopta is Ramses the second's son, right? And Ramses the second fought the battle of Kadesh, and Ramses the second is Shishak, or Ria Shishak Miyamana. And if you track to the 4th year of Solomon, you will get 480 years. Now, 650 minus 480 is 170 years. You see the closeness in the time frame, y'all, that we could go and jump all the way back to where you got now the Ipper papyrus, the Brooklyn papyrus. Now we're getting into the archaeology with this house that I'm about to read about. 650 years from the Menopta still being erected. This is still the same time frame. It cannot be Thutmose the third, right? Because the time is off. It cannot be Ramses II because the time is off. There's no evidence of an exodus happening, of a collapse of Egypt happening, right? It can't be Sethnik because the time don't add up at all. He's too close to the consensus. Now, there are things even in Sethnik's history, like the children, they said these Asiatics came out and they borrowed silver and gold, right? And yeah, they borrowed silver and gold. But in the Brooklyn papyrus, it's saying that these Asiatics did the same thing, right? So we can't count on that to be like, oh, this is the Pharaoh of the Exodus. No, it has to be more. It has to be undeniably more. And even if we are wrong about this, at least have it to the point where the patterns are so evident. If it's not it, then once again, what is it? What is this story going on, right? Let us continue. So, 600, let's read it again. At least 650 years before the Menopta stele was erected, a Syrian-style house was built in Egypt's Nile Delta at the site of Avaris. Its remains were unearthed by the team of Austrian excavators led by Manfred Bietig, who recognized it as a Mittelsaal house or a middle room house. That's what it means. A middle room house, right? A Syrian-style middle room house in Egypt in the Nile Delta at Avaris, which is in Goshen. Y'all see this? This is stuff that you cannot deny. It was here. The archaeologists found it, right? So what is it, right? They found it. Let us continue. It was part of a Semitic community that settled on virgin grasslands near one of the branches of the Nile River. By examining the cultural materials left behind, the excavators concluded that the people had come from Canaan, the Canaan area, and settled with permission of the Egyptian state. No walls surrounded the prosperous community, right? When Jacob moved to Egypt during a drought with his family and flocks, Pharaoh freely gave him the best land in Egypt for grazing flocks. We just read that, right? Because Joseph had it done, right? He asked Pharaoh to bring his father and his brethren down here, right? Let us continue. The Syrian style house would have been just the type of structure one would expect the leader of this clan would build for himself, right? So now why was it a Syrian style house, right? We got to look at all of this. Why was it a Syrian style house? Now we're going to build up a case to show why it would be that, right? Let us go into Genesis, the 11th chapter. Now, it also said that they found this in Haran, right? Or, no, I'm sorry, it was a Syrian style house, which is in Haran, or Haran. Haran, however you pronounce it, however you want to pronounce it. So let us see what clue we have of why it would be a Syrian style house in the land of Egypt, in the Nile Delta, where they claim this would be Jacob and his sons. Now, once again, Syrian style house in the Nile Delta. Why would this be here, right? Why did archaeologists find this here? Let us go to Genesis, the 11th chapter. Genesis, the 11th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 31. Genesis, the 11th chapter. Look at me. Can't even find Genesis, the 11th chapter. Ain't that sad? Genesis, the 11th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 31. Verse 31 reads, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there, right? So we see that this is where Abraham ended up going, right? But it said a Syrian-style house. We also know that that would be in North Syria, but there's more clues here, right? Let us continue. Let's go to Genesis, the 29th chapter. There's jewels in this book, y'all. You just have to go through it, right? And it's not that complicated, right? We don't have to be lazy when it comes to doing things like this because we're trying to prove our faith. Or in other words, we want to go into the academic community and we want to prove our faith in the academic community because it's fact. It'll be fact now, right? And of course, people, it can be fact all you want it to be. People still not gonna listen to it. That's why only a remnant gonna be saved. But guess what? You will have this information to be able to be a better priest and to convince somebody to walk in the ways of Christ with the history and archaeology, right? People don't want to always hear that praise Jesus, he's my Lord and Savior. That's good and dandy. That is true. He is our Lord and Savior. But people don't want to hear that. They want something more tangible, right? So let's give them something more tangible so when they come in, it's not all religious and all this. It actually something based on our history that we can relate to, that we can be a part of, right? Let's keep going. Genesis 29, and we're going to start at verse 10. Genesis, the 29th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 10. Verse 10 reads, and it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, in the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother, right? And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. So this story is dealing with the fact that Rebekah told Jacob to go to the house of Bethuel, to the house of Laban, and get him a wife from his, right? Get him a wife from Laban's daughters, right? And this is how this story is playing out. So, verse 14, and Laban said to him, surely thou art my bone and my flesh, and he abode with him in the space of a month. And Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught or nothing? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? So, of course, he wants him to work for him. That's what he came down here to work too. He's saying, what shall his wages be, right? Let's continue. Verse 16, and Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. So guess what, y'all? Rachel, even though we're gonna see later on that the country that they lived in required that the firstborn be married before the second, right? So the endowment process has happened, right? Or it's in the midst of happening. The endowment process is in the midst of happening. So now there is a number of years that is going to take for him to pay this off, right? Because that's what his wages were. His wages are going to be the daughters of Laban, right? Verse 20. And he served, I'm sorry, where we at? Oh, skip down to verse 22. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. So this is not about the actual marriage and all that, y'all. This is about the number of years that he was with Laban while he was down there, right? So I'm building a case. Verse 24, and Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid, and it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, what is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve thee for Rachel, wherefore thou hast beguiled me, right? He tricked him, right? And Laban said, it must not so be done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. So according to the law of the land in their country, it was not so to give the younger before the firstborn. So he worked that 7 years. Now he's stuck with Leah, right? He worked that 7 years. He stuck with Leah. What does Laban say after that? Verse 27. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet another 7 years. 14 years, not right? 14 years. I'm building this case for a reason. So now he was with Laban for 14 years. 14 years. Let's finish that off. Verse 28. And Jacob did so, and he fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. So now we're at 14 years, right? 14 years. Now, where does this Syrian house, that was the point, where does this Syrian house come into play? Why is there a Syrian house? Let us go now to Genesis, the 31st chapter, and we're going to start at verse 24. Genesis 31, and we're going to start at verse 24. Verse 24 says, and God came to Laban, the Syrian, right, in a dream by night, and said unto him, take heed that thou speakest not to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban and his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. So Laban was a Syrian, right? He was a Syrian. Let us continue. We're going to skip down to verse 36. And Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Because Laban got mad at Jacob because he was trying to take his property, the stuff that he inherited, and his daughters to the land of Canaan, back to the land of Canaan without telling him. So Laban was just furious. So he pursued Jacob, and Jacob became furious because he was pursuing him. Like, what have I done? I'm taking my family. I worked for you. I'm taking my family. I'm going back to the land that I came from. I just didn't let you know about it. Right? But I haven't sinned against you, right? So why are you pursuing me? This is the issue. Let us continue. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. Also, Laban had one of them little guys in his house, and his daughter ended up taking it, and now he thinks Jacob then took it. Right? That's another reason why this is going on. But let's see how many years that Jacob was with Laban so we can make sense of what I'm about to bring up, right? Verse 38, this 20 years have I been with thee, thy ewees and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have not been eaten, right? So Jacob was with Laban the Syrian for 20 years. This is why you would see when they go into the land of Egypt, when they go into the city of Ramses, which is this time was called Avaris, right? That you would see a Syrian style house because Jacob lived with a Syrian for 20 years. So that would give him the mindset to build that type of house that he pretty much grew up in, right? 20 years of his life, right? Had his family and everything. That also means that his wives are Syrian. If Laban is a Syrian, his wives are Syrian. I mean, his daughters are Syrian, right? So it would make sense to have a Syrian style house because that's where they came from. Y'all see that? Right? This is not far-fetched at all. So we're coming up with all this evidence of why you're finding this stuff in the land of Egypt, in Avaris, which is the biblical Ramses, in the land of Goshen, right? Who else is this? Who is this? What is this, right? Let us continue. Now we are going to deal, bear with me. Now we are going to deal with the Brooklyn Papyrus. So we read about the Brooklyn Papyrus briefly, but we're going to get a little more detail. So, the Brooklyn Papyrus. So, the Brooklyn Papyrus is one of the most common charges against the Bible's Exodus account. One of the most charges against the Bible's Exodus account is that there is no evidence of a massive Semitic slave population in Egypt in the era of Pharaoh Ramses. And this is true, y'all. There is no massive migration of Semitic people, right, or Shemitic people coming out of the land of Egypt during the time of Ramses. This does not exist. It doesn't match up with the scripts, none of that. So we're going to kill all these archaeologists that been lying to us, part of this crafty council for all these years. This is a long time, y'all. We did not have any anything that would point us to this being real besides this. They have hidden all these things. Now that you got the internet, now that you got all these resources to research, we can find this stuff now, right? Let us continue. However, in the earlier Middle Kingdom, 13th dynasty, there go the Middle Kingdom again, right? Dealing with the Brooklyn Papyrus, there is evidence of Semitic settlements all across northeast Nile Delta. A document from further south at this time lists nearly 100 slaves for a single estate, the majority of whom were Semitic. The Bible says the Israelites became so numerous that they spread across Egypt. All of the documents from the Nile Delta have rotted away because of the Nile floods that covered the area annually for thousands of years. So this is why we don't have those records, right? So we have no written records from Delta Egypt. But this slave list from the south has dozens of slaves, including the biblical forms of names like Shipra. Y'all remember that name? Shipra, the same name as the Hebrew midwife in the Exodus account. Asher and Issachar. We have these names in the Brooklyn Papyrus. Yes, they are in there, right? If you read this book, Patterns of Evidence, he has the pictures of the Brooklyn Papyrus, and Shipra, Asher, and Issachar are in those books. Who is this during the Middle Kingdom? Who is this? Right? Because this stuff is real. Now, I'm bringing y'all the stuff that the archaeologists have found undeniably, right? And we're fitting it in the Middle Kingdom, these events with these documents, these events, this archaeology. All of this is showing that we have a story, we have archaeology, we have history that matches the biblical narrative in the Middle Kingdom, that matches the time frame of who Shishak is, which is Ramses, all the way back 480 years, all the way back into the Middle Kingdom. Now you got the Brooklyn Papyrus. Now you have the Ipuwer Papyrus. Now you got the Mythosol House, right? You have these things showing the patterns of evidence of the Exodus. We don't need dates. We showing evidence, right? Let us continue. Now, remember what it said, right? Let us go to Exodus, the first chapter. Exodus, the first chapter. Because we're going to pull this stuff up. Everything the archaeologists say, we can find in the scripts, right? Exodus, the first chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Exodus 1:1. Here we go. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came out of the land of Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Issachar, there we go, right? Zebulun and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. You see that? They match, y'all. Brooklyn Papyrus, Exodus 1, right? And same names, right? Ipuwer Papyrus with the 10 plagues, with the Ipuwer Lane Papyrus, the 344, chapters 2 and 9. You got Exodus 7 through 10, showing you the same stuff in the Middle Kingdom. Now, if this was happening in the Middle Kingdom, that means anything after that is a plagiarized story. Right? Anything after that is a plagiarized story. And I'm not doing what the Comedics do. This is the Exodus. Y'all will say this is something that happened in Egypt, but it don't make no sense because it's matching the biblical narrative. Right? Let us continue. All the souls, verse 5, all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls. For Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died and all his brethren in all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Guess where that's at? In the Brooklyn Papyrus. Not just Exodus 1, but in the Brooklyn Papyrus. 2 witnesses. Let us keep going. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them out of the land. Therefore they set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and to build for Pharaoh treasure cities, Python and Ramses, right? So they build in treasure cities. This is in these papyruses, right? Let us continue. But the more they afflicted them, the more that they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their life bitter with hard bondage, mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. Their service wherein which they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah. In Exodus, the 1st chapter, in the Brooklyn Papyrus. Y'all see how that worked? And the name of the other was Puyah. And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them on the stools, if it be a son, then thou shalt kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So they were trying to kill the nation. And how do you kill a nation? By killing off the males, y'all. Right? That's how you kill a nation. So let us continue. Now we're going to the Ipuwer Papyrus to continue this. The Ipuwer Papyrus, and we're going to continue this. Let us continue. This common assessment, this is the Ipuwer Papyrus now. This common assessment is due to a perceived lack of evidence for the entire range of events in the Exodus period, from the Bible's portrayal of the Israelites' arrival in Egypt, to their enslavement as their population exploded, to their departure in massive from a land devastated by plagues, to the feasibility of a journey across dry wilderness areas like Sinai and Negev, to finally conquering the promised land of Canaan 40 years after their departure. Another common charge made against the biblical Exodus is that no hint of anything like the disasters of the Exodus is recorded in Egyptian documents from the time of Ramses. We're going to keep stressing that because there is nothing in the time of Ramses, right? The calamities experienced by Egypt were so severe that their society would have collapsed. In fact, every one of the images of the Exodus plagues, from the locusts to frogs, hail, waters turning into blood, etc., is used in the book of Revelations to describe events during the end times judgment. That's a funny thing too. A papyrus house in a Leiden museum in the Netherlands records a time of great calamity. So y'all see, these things ain't just made up. They're in museums, y'all. Right? They're holding them in museums. So it records the time of the great calamities in Egypt and the resulting chaos that occurred when society had broken down. Known as the admonitions of an Egyptian sage, which is what it's called, as well, and also as the Ipuwer papyrus. It uses several phrases earlier on that bear an uncanny similarity to the Exodus account. These include the river turning into blood, darkness, all is ruined, wailing throughout the land with no shortage of the dead, and the slave taking what he finds. While gold, silver, and precious stones are strung on the necks of the female slaves. This is what is in this document, right? That's crazy. The Bible recounts that the Israelites asked for silver and gold jewelry and they exited Egypt. So this is also, you can find this history with Asiatics doing this in the time of Sethnic, right, of the 20th dynasty. And I know I see my brothers break this down, and it was a good assessment. I definitely see the point you were trying to make. It's just not enough for everything. You have to put everything in context with all of the events happening simultaneously with documents proving that it happened at this time in this era in order to get the accuracy. It can't be little small stuff. You see what I'm saying? And that was small stuff. Now, there might be other things that the brothers have found that I haven't found, but other than that, like I said, there is a timeline, there is a pattern of evidence farther back than what this is. So if it was in this era, what is this? If it's in this era, what is this? If it's in this era, what is this? See, that's what you got to think about. That this era is undeniably showing the story happening. So what is everything after that? You got to think about that, right? Let us continue. Let's see. More information on this and the other artifacts on the list can be found in the Book of the Patterns of Evidence. Once again, show y'all what that is. Grab you one of these. Also, like I said, if you want to get in more detailed, go onto the YouTube to look at Time Wall Patterns of Evidence by David Rowe. He gets in deeper as far as language and everything and breaking it down so it'll make more sense. But like I said, this is stuff coming from him as well. And the sources are on the article. Let us continue. While some scholars focus on the date of the copy of the Ipuwer papyrus in the Leiden Museum, 19th Dynasty, New Kingdom, this is why they associated with Ramses II, because of the Leiden papyrus, which is not the original, right? It's not the original. That was copied in the 19th Dynasty. The Ipuwer papyrus was made in the 13th Dynasty. So that let's get that in our heads. So said the Leiden papyrus, 19th Dynasty, New Kingdom, and others speculate on what events the document might be speaking of. Most think it may refer to the collapse of the end of the Old Kingdom of Egypt, right? The first concern is to determine when the original story was composed. The consensus modern specialists is that what we have is a copy of an account originally composed very late in the Middle Kingdom, in line with the era of other pieces of evidence matching the Bible. For instance, the account mentions pyramid builders, right? Python and Ramses, right? In the present tense. And the building of pyramids ceased at the close of the 13th dynasty, right? So that's what we have, y'all, right? The end of the 13th dynasty. Now let's go to, you see now you have the plagues in the Ipuwer papyrus. Now, let's go see the significance. Let's go to Exodus, the 11th chapter. Now that we have all this evidence showing that this thing happened in the Middle Kingdom, right? Now we can bring our Passover into play. Now our Passover seems more genuine, more real. Why? Because the people who have no bias, right? We have an agnostic Egyptologist, archeologist, historian who is not a Christian, who doesn't care about proving the Bible as far as the God of Israel. He's just proving it because he feels that it is the most accurate source of history, or one of the most, that we have. And he's right, right? But I wanted to point out the fact that he was agnostic. So we don't want to hear none of that. Oh, he was just trying to find something that made it seem like it was real. No, he's not a Christian. Let's get that in our heads. He was not a Christian. Now let's go to Exodus, the 11th chapter. Exodus, the 11th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Exodus, the 11th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Verse 1 reads, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Yet I will bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out thence altogether. Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of his neighbor's jewels and silver and jewels of gold." See that? Where is that at? That is in the Ipuwer papyrus. Where is it also? What's also in there? The death of the firstborn, leading up to the Passover. Y'all see that? This is real and was recorded by the Egyptians themselves, not based on the Passover. The Passover is our thing, but they were basing it on the collapse and the plagues coming in and God showing himself. They're writing it, right? They wrote it, or one of their scholars wrote it, because remember what I told y'all how the Egyptians are in general. One of their scholars happened to write it, right? Let us continue. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of the Pharaoh's servants, in the sight of the people. And Moses said, Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservants that is behind the mill, and all of the firstborn of beasts. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And that goes for wherever we are. He puts a difference between us and the heathen. So this is our Passover. I'm going to deal with that because it's coming up, right? It's coming up tonight when the sun goes down. We're going to deal with this because this is the point. We see tangible evidence that this happened. So everybody out there that's nervous about plagues happening, we got tangible evidence that none of that stuff is going to come upon you and kill you. That the angel of death is not going to come upon you and kill you. Because what did it says? But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue. Right? Against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. He said that part, right? Let us continue. Let's go to Exodus, the 12th chapter. Exodus, the 12th chapter, and we are going to start at verse 12. Exodus, the 12th chapter, and we're going to start at verse 12. Verse 12 says, For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, Against all the gods of Egypt will I execute judgment. I am the Lord. And he's doing that. Y'all notice he keeps saying that throughout the scriptures. I'm going to do this, and you going to know that I am the Lord. This is what he's trying to let y'all know, right? But it's the angel of death that is going to pass over you when the plagues come out. This is what Passover means. And you have to keep the faith that your Passover will pass over you when the plagues, this pandemic coming out. I ain't worried about none of this stuff, right? Because we going to get past this. And like I said, we ain't heard not one Israelite die from this. So let's stay informed, right? Let's know where we're headed, because we are in the beginning of sorrows. But let's stay girded and strong, y'all. Ain't no time to panic. Ain't no time to wither in your faith. Your faith don't need to be shaky at this point. It's too much evidence out there for you to be slacking in your faith, right? Let us continue. Verse 13, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the house where ye are. So now that was going on back then. They used the blood of the lamb. Now we use the blood of the lamb as far as Christ. His blood is supposed to be a token that that death angel will not come upon you. Right? Let us continue. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. Right? So there you go. This is our Passover. This is our Passover based on archaeology, history, documentations from the heathens, recording what's happening to them in their kingdom while we're in the kingdom, being protected by our God, being separated by our God. Y'all see that? This is nothing not to believe, right? What is this? This is the question we keep trying to ask people. What is this? If this ain't the Exodus, what is this? Right? Let us continue. Now we're going to deal with the walls of Jericho. It's funny to end off like that, but we're going to end off like that. The walls of Jericho, right? And this is the conquest in Canaan 40 years after the Exodus. The walls of Jericho. Let's see. Perhaps the biggest claim made against the Bible account, Exodus events, is the lack of evidence matching the conquest of Canaan 40 years after the Exodus. However, once again, the evidence matching the Bible can be found only centuries before the time of Ramses. I'm telling y'all, they messed this thing completely up. They did, right? Let us keep going. However, the starkest example of this is the walls of Jericho. The Bible says that the walls came tumbling down as the Israelites marched around the city, blew their trumpets, and shouted. They then burned the city. Archaeologists found that the high walls of the city did fall outward and down the slopes that the city was built on, right? This would have provided a convenient ramp for the Israelites to travel up to take the city. A very thick burn layer that took place after the walls came down and evidence extremely high temperatures convinced the excavators that the city was intentionally burned by an enemy. Other evidence, such as uneaten and abundant grain stores, show that the city was taken after a very short siege. And after the spring grain harvest had come, are evidence exactly matching the biblical account of a short siege soon after the Passover. Right? So we're dealing with our Passover again. Evidence. The archaeologists have found evidence after the Passover of the siege of Jericho. Right? Let's keep going. The debate about the exact date of the final city destruction at Jericho will continue. And of course, we're not dealing with that because we're not dealing with the dates. But guess what? The events happen, right? The events happen. Now, we didn't went from Joseph to Joshua, right? Joseph to Joshua, showing in the Bible, showing what the excavators, the archaeologists have found, right? Okay. So, I'm sorry. Let's go back. It says that the exact date of the final city destruction at Jericho will continue, but there can be no doubt that the evidence matches the Bible in numerous specific and unique ways. And it all happened centuries earlier than expected for one using the standard Ramses view, right? This is the God of Israel showing who he is and proclaiming himself to the nations. This is indeed the God of Israel. So let us go to the last scripture showing what happened, showing this covenant stone in Shechem. Let's go to Joshua, last place. Joshua, the 24th chapter. Joshua, the 24th chapter. And we're going to start at verse 1. Joshua, the 21st chapter, and we're going to start at verse 1. Verse 1 reads, "And Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and for their judges and for their officers, and they presented themselves before God." Where was they? In Shechem. Y'all see that? In Shechem. We're going to skip down to verse 25. Verse 25 reads, "So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and set them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God and took a great stone and set it up there under an oak. And that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said unto all the people, Behold, this stone shall be a witness unto us, for it hath heard all the words of the Lord which he spake unto us. It shall be therefore a witness unto you, lest ye deny your God." So if you're going to keep denying this evidence, you're going to keep denying your God. You're going to keep denying the power of the Passover. Now, we shouldn't have any what's the word I'm trying to find? We shouldn't have any doubt. That's what I'm trying to find. We shouldn't have any doubt that this stuff happened. Guess what, y'all? The archaeologists are finding this stuff. They are going out there risking their lives, not only risking their lives, but spending their life savings, right? They spending their life savings on this, y'all. So we got to get in the habit of showing our faith. And since we have tangible evidence, we don't need no dates. As you can see, we don't need no dates. The archaeologists have found this stuff, and they know they found it in the Middle Kingdom. The Brooklyn Papyrus, the Mythosol House, the Ippara Papyrus, the walls of Jericho. These four things with other things. Remember, there's 10 of them now. I only mentioned 4. With the scriptures and the history to back it up. We have this stuff. We have it. So there's no, like I said, keep your faith strong. Believe in that Passover, which we are going to sip this wine, and we're going to eat these unleavened breads or the unleavened crackers or whatever the case may be. And we're going to remember the token that we received if we put that blood over our doorpost, or we believe in our Mashiach, which is Christ. And I thank you for your time. Shalom, shalom, Israel. And once again, happy Passover. And we're going to do this thing.